37-year-old mother of 5, Rachel Morin, was brutally murdered on August 5, 2023. She left her Maryland home at 6 p.m. for a run in the Morin Trail in Bel Air, but she never returned. And her new boyfriend at the time, Richard Tobin, reported her missing 5.5 hours later at 11:30 p.m. By the next day, her body was found, and there were indicators that Rachel sustained a prolonged and vicious attack. Investigators spent the next 10 months searching for the suspect. During this time, DNA was found on Rachel and was run through the CODIS database and ended up matching with a man linked to an assault in California. And this man has now been identified and arrested for the murder of Rachel. But who is this suspect? What was his motive? And how did investigators finally find him? I'm Linda with It's a Crime, so now let's get into it. On Saturday, August 5th, 2023, in the early evening, Rachel Morin went for a run in the Morin Trail. The weather at that time was around 85 degrees, and the 6.25 mile Morin Trail gets its name from the former Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad corridor that ran through the town of Bel Air in Harford County. The track was dismantled in the 50s and later turned into a heritage trail along the railroad's previous route. It consists of a 3.3 mile section through Bel Air and a 1.7 mile section in the neighboring Forest Hill. Now, according to alltrails.com, the trail is moderately challenging and would take roughly 2.5 hours to complete. Since Rachel's murder, authorities have warned hikers to obviously take extra care and be aware of their surroundings. Now let's get into the timeline of events. At 11 p.m., 5.5 hours after she went to the trail and never returned, Rachel's boyfriend reported her missing, and police launched a search on the trail and in the surrounding areas. Just a note, others were very quick to blame Rachel's boyfriend, and he even made a Facebook post about it saying, "I love Rachel. I wouldn't do anything to her. Let the family and I grieve. Yes, I have a past, but I also have 15 months clean and have changed as a person." And according to news reports, he did have previous allegations of domestic violence, and I believe it was a previous relationship. Now, on August 6th, the next day at around 1 p.m., volunteers who were searching for Rachel found her body in a drain runoff near the trail. She had been savagely attacked and murdered. Police advised reporters, though, to ignore an account given by a local man named Michael Gabrzeski, who was part of a group of volunteers. Michael gave a harrowing description of the discovery of Rachel's body in a tunnel on the trail. But police insisted Michael had not found Rachel's body, nor had he even seen it. But Michael's father, John, said that his son was not lying and that Michael was in a group of people who found Rachel's body, although he was not the one to actually find her. He said Michael's stepdaughter, Cecilia, who knew Rachel, and one other person was with him looking for her, and they were the ones who found her.
I had never walked it myself.
For Michael Gabrzeski,
I told my stepdaughter, I said, look, it's not going to be laying out in the open.
the Morin Trail in Bel Air, uncharted territory.
I said, she's going to be tucked away somewhere.
But the former National Park search and rescue officer has extensive experience tracking down missing people.
So basically, it's my passion to bring closure to that family by bringing her back and not having them wonder what happened.
Following reports, 37-year-old Rachel Morin left for a walk and never returned, Gabrzeski and his stepdaughter taking off on a search rooted on instinct.
I just kept seeing tunnels in my mind. I don't know why, but I just kept seeing tunnels.
Despite law enforcement swarming the area for almost a full day, Gabrzeski's stepdaughter locating the body in about an hour. The deadly discovery.
Once we got down there and I started seeing them tunnels, I started getting goosebumps.
Made in a tunnel drain not far from the trail's main entrance.
I saw a terrible mess.
Gabrzeski's visions meeting the reality of a gruesome scene.
There's not going to be an open casket, I can guarantee you that.
He says Morin's body found in a pool of blood, suffering severe head trauma, an injury he believes could be the result of a rock.
My daughter said that there was a big rock down there that was all caked in blood.
Authorities denied Michael's claim that his stepdaughter Cecilia found Rachel's body. Michael also told the Daily Mail that Rachel was laying on her back fully naked and she had brutal head trauma, and said it looked like her head had been smashed in with a rock. And he continued and said there was a 15 to 20 foot blood trail, so it looked like she had been beaten and dragged into that position, and it looked like the killer was trying to erase her identity. The right side of her face was gone. However, the Hartford County Sheriff's Office stated he had no first-hand knowledge of the crime scene, and they said at this time we do not want to offer him any more notoriety. Additionally, continued discussion, they said, can hurt the investigation. To us, it is clear he has provided differing information to different news stations and our investigators. Based on our information, he would not have any first-hand knowledge of the crime scene. And elaborating on why Michael might have made this claim, they said, quote, there are many times where, for whatever reasons, people want to insert themselves into one of these high-profile homicides. Tell me what you think about this and this guy. Let me know if you know more about him in the comments. Now, a week and a half after her murder on August 17th, police held a press conference about the case and announced that the DNA that was found on Rachel's body matched a man previously in connection with a home invasion in Los Angeles.
DNA evidence is part of nearly every modern-day investigation, and in Rachel's case, DNA evidence was collected by our Forensic Services Unit. That DNA was analyzed by the Maryland State Police, and it was ran through the National CODIS system. This DNA evidence has come back as a match, tied to a home invasion and an assault of a young girl in Los Angeles this past March. Unfortunately, that suspect has not been positively identified, but he did leave behind his DNA. Based on the DNA evidence, we consider the individual in the video we obtained from the Los Angeles Police Department and that we are about to show you on our TV screens to be the person that murdered Rachel Morin on August 5th.
Now, this home invasion LA was a brutal attack on a 9-year-old girl and her mother. The man broke into the home in the middle of the night and then he assaulted them in there. But guess what he left behind though? Besides major trauma, he left his hat behind, which I'm guessing is a pretty good start on the DNA that he left. So already March and August of 2023, there were 2 victims, and there's another one that I'll get to in a minute, and that's only the ones we know about. Also, since this home invasion was in LA and Rachel Morin's was in Maryland, of course there were thoughts of wondering, why is he traveling across the country? What's going on? What was the connection? And the obvious, are there more victims? On August 24th, with no new leads, a $10,000 reward was offered for information related to the wanted man. And the hunt for Rachel's murder became so widespread that even the notorious dog, the bounty hunter, began helping with the search. He posted on Facebook, "Hey Bounty Nation, I need you guys to do what you do best and help me identify this suspect." And attached to the post, he included the security footage from the home invasion and the police's description of the perpetrator. In the footage, we see the suspect walking backwards, shirtless, out the door, and then leaving. And the police didn't detail anything further at the time other than the sketch and the video clip. People speculated about Hernandez and even zooming in to see he was wearing a necklace when the footage was slowed down. Other people speculated that maybe he was part of the army because of his haircut and those kinds of things. Now, despite the video footage, it wasn't until February of 2024, over 6 months after Rachel's body was discovered, that police released a sketch of the suspect. And on May 20th, what would have been Rachel's 38th birthday, investigators uncovered a lead that led them to the suspect, and the investigative genetic genealogy team traced the DNA to Victor's potential family members and even traveled to El Salvador to help identify the suspected killer. Now, this fascinates me. DNA does in general, but what they do, if you don't already know, is they put the suspect's DNA into the database. They get matches of family members. They start to create a tree, and if it's further cousins, like a distant cousin, for example, then they go and they narrow it down. It's really, really fascinating. Now, following the DNA match, police did not give a name of the suspect, just a physical description of him as a 5'9" Hispanic male weighing approximately 160 pounds. And Cece Moore, who is the genetic genealogist and DNA detective for Parabon Nanolabs, said they know the suspect is responsible for 2 separate crimes and said, quote, "This is the perfect application of investigative genetic genealogy." And the technique which famously identified the Golden State Killer uses traditional DNA analysis and the public records to build these family trees and zero in on these suspects. And it has typically been used to close cold cases, but Moore is an advocate for its wider application. She said, "When you can stop a criminal in his tracks and prevent him from victimizing more people, that is really the best use." Now, on June 14th, 2024, after 10 long months, 23-year-old Victor Martinez Hernandez was arrested in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was charged with the first-degree murder and SA of Rachel Morin. Investigators said it was a police tip and the DNA evidence that helped to identify him.
As everyone's aware, on August 6, 2023, our peaceful Harford County community was rocked when the body of Rachel Morin was discovered in an area just about a mile from here, just off the Ma and Pa hiking trail here just outside the town of Bel Air. In addition to the impact to our local Harford County community, Rachel's murder gained national and even international attention. The young mother of 5, whose life was violently taken in a public location, is one of the safest places in the state. It's not supposed to happen, and it shouldn't have happened. In the days and months since Rachel was murdered, Rachel's family and friends, our Harford County community, and the men and women of the Harford County Sheriff's Office, along with all of our allied partners, have worked tirelessly to bring the individual responsible for her death to justice. Our deputies and our partners have worked this case with persistence and passion for Rachel and for her family every day over the past 10 months. Just over 3 weeks ago, on May 20th, on what should have been Rachel's 38th birthday, and in a poetic coincidence, or perhaps in Rachel's own divine assistance, our investigators uncovered a lead that led us to this day. And on this day, I'm here to tell you, Rachel's murderer is no longer a free man. Hopefully, he will never have the opportunity to walk free again.
The Tulsa Police Department posted on Facebook about finding the suspect and said officers found the suspect casually sitting at the bar and placed him under arrest. Initially, the suspect lied about his identity, no surprise, and denied any knowledge of the crimes he is wanted for. Martinez Hernandez was initially taken into custody on a trespassing charge, it was said, but when officers ran his information, they found he was already wanted in connection back in Maryland on that SA and murder of Rachel. He then consented to being extradited back to Maryland on these charges. And Harford County Sheriff Jeffrey Galler said, 5 hours after meeting with Morin's family and just before midnight, our time, police in Tulsa, Oklahoma, assisted by our federal partners, located and arrested Rachel's murderer, Victor Antonio Martinez Hernandez. He also said, "We all suspected that Rachel was not his first victim. It is my understanding that this suspect, this monster, fled to the United States illegally after committing the brutal murders of a young woman in El Salvador a month earlier in January of 2023. So we have January victim of murder, March victims of home invasion and assault, and the August murder of Rachel Morin and the SA charge. Who else is there? Where there's one, there's more. Authorities also believe that the suspect was hiding beside the trail where Rachel was and then attacked and killed her. Now, when I lived in Kelowna, British Columbia, here in Canada, 10 years ago, there was an awesome trail people would go to and walk. There still is. And it was a pathway along a river. And a creepy guy was riding his road bike on this trail, which is odd in itself, as it's a $3,000+ bike. And it was like a gravel trail kind of thing. And he would go and assault women on the trail. And he hid too. And I had a run-in with him. However, as he came up to me on the trail while I was riding my bike, I actually looked right in time to look back and he sped off. I was actually riding with my son. I called the cops cops when I heard this was happening on the trail and put two and two together. Then I was called down to the cop shop, and I was to identify this guy through a series of pictures, which was interesting. Now, back to Rachel. Following the news of this arrest of Victor, there was some political upheaval as Donald Trump released a statement pointing the blame at President Biden. He said Rachel Morin was on a run in Maryland, just like Laken Riley was in Georgia when she was brutally killed by an illegal monster who was wanted for murder in El Salvador and fled to the USA because he knew Crooked Joe would let him in. And he says now Rachel Morin's 5 young children will grow up without their mother because Crooked Joe refuses to shut down the border. And I guess Trump also made a personal call to Rachel's mom, and they had a talk, and the Biden administration didn't. It actually reminds me of a recent video I did on my friend's cousin, Tori Dunn, who was murdered in a home invasion just recently, and the same thing happened. The opposition phoned Tori's dad, but nothing from the Prime Minister of Canada, and now all the premiers have written to him, to our Prime Minister, to do something about it. We'll see what happens. As for the issue in Rachel Morin's case, that's not the only case that's been in the news about illegal immigrants. There's a really young girl in Texas whose life was taken away from her, and it was also by illegal men from Venezuela. And she was murdered and SA'd near her home and found in a nearby creek. I believe she was 12 or 13 years old. As for the borders, there's more info coming up about Victor and his border crossings. Now, we just talked about El Salvador, but what I didn't mention was Victor Martinez Hernandez was also wanted for murdering a woman back there as well before fleeing to the United States. That happened in that January of 2023. And as for the border crossings, he had previously made 3 unsuccessful attempts to enter the United States before illegally making it across the border on February 13th, 2023 near El Paso. And it was revealed in court papers on June 20th of 2024 that Hernandez had been hiding with relatives in Maryland during the nationwide manhunt for him that ended with the arrest for murder. And according to court documents, his family members told police that he had stayed with them between December 2023 and May 2024 before suddenly vanishing. They didn't clarify, though, where they lived in Maryland or how close the location was to where Rachel was murdered. It is reported that Hernandez left behind bags of clothes after leaving his relative's home in May, and police were able to collect DNA from those clothing items that match samples from the crime scene. So now they have the hat from the Los Angeles case that was left, clothes from the relatives, and DNA from the crime scene. So thankfully, it's not looking good for this guy. So on June 21st, 2024, Hernandez made his first court appearance as Rachel's family watched, and Judge Kerwin Miller ordered he be held without bail, acknowledging him as a danger to society and a flight risk. He is currently being held without bond and awaiting trial, which is set for October 23rd of 2024. And prosecutors are seeking a life sentence without the possibility for parole. And Hernandez is being represented by the Maryland Public Defender's Office. An initial court appearance was scheduled for July 22nd, but that was canceled last minute. And in a press conference, the sheriff of the county says, "I want him to die in a Maryland prison." Law enforcement also stated that they want to be clear that the suspect acted alone and that he does not represent the entire Hispanic community of the county. As for Victor's criminal history, law enforcement said he has ties to known gangs and has connections in Washington, D.C. area and in both Virginia and Prince George's County. And there were signs put up at the trailheads of the Monpaw Trail and at each Harford County Sheriff's Office facility marking the arrest that was made. Rachel's mother, Patricia Morin, spoke after the arrest and said, "At one point when things looked really bleak and hopeless, the lead detective told me patience will win in the end." And she says, "I'm very thankful and very grateful."
I could see all the people that were involved. And that's not even all the external agencies that were involved. And it just gave me such hope that they really did care about our family and my daughter, that they were going to work diligently to find the person that murdered her.
Patricia heartbreakingly said that Rachel's children are struggling the most and said they just want their mom back and their lives to be normal. And for some of the older ones, they know it will never be. Matt McMahon, the father of Rachel's eldest daughter, said that he felt a mixture of joy, relief, and gratitude at the news of the arrest, as well as sadness at the things Rachel would never get to experience. Their daughter, 18-year-old Faye, is about to have her own daughter this year, and Matt said it's a happy moment and a sad moment too, because Rachel should be here for that moment. And Faye should be able to give Rachel that news, to tell Rachel, you're going to be a grandmother, but she can never give that news. There was also a GoFundMe set up to cover Rachel's funeral costs. That page is now closed, and they raised $56,159. A week before Rachel's murder, Rachel's 4-month-old niece died of SIDS. The loss of Rachel is a true tragedy to those who knew and loved her. Her family no doubt feel relieved at the arrest of the suspect, but still have a really long road ahead for the justice Rachel deserves. It's so sad that we have to be concerned these days so much about our safety, and that things are happening everywhere at any time, and more than you think. Check out this video where a young Canadian girl who's hanging out at home with her boyfriend when the unthinkable happened, and now the family is screaming for justice. And speaking of safety, check out my encounter last summer. That was pretty darn scary.